All right. It's been a little while since our last interview, but we're back and we have with us one of my favorite martial artists and somebody who really embodies the idea of Musha Shugyo. He's traveled all over the world and trained all over the world for many years, and one of my favorite people to train with, one of the highest ranking people in our Goshin Jutsu system, Master Pat DeVore. So, Master DeVore, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Sure.
So to start off, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your training background and history.
All right. I grew up in a little town north of Pittsburgh, and it was kind of a tough little town, lived by the train tracks, as they say. And I had three brothers, and I found my blood pressure was better when I was standing than when I was lying relaxed. And the Navy couldn't understand that when I was in the Navy. And I finally told them it's because when you're laying down, one of your brothers is going to jump on you and pound you. So I always felt more calm and relaxed standing. I got into karate purely by accident. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't thinking about it. I was going to Mercyhurst College. It was a college at the time. And in the main building, there's an old gymnasium in the basement. A few friends of mine, classmates, were down there trying to play basketball, pretty dark, dim little gym floor. And we looked over and we saw a couple of young ladies doing some weird things and throwing each other and different strikes or stuff like that. And so I said to the guys, I said, let's go over and see what they're doing. So I walked over and there was this beautiful redhead, and found out they were practicing for a self-defense course exam that they were having in a day or two. And the instructor's name is Mr. Dave Shimpano. I'll talk more about him later. But anyways, being a smart mouth, I nicely said to the redhead, that stuff doesn't work. And she said, well, really? Why don't you try grabbing me? Which is exactly what I wanted to do anyways. So I reached out and grabbed her, I think, but the next thing I remember was laying on the gym floor on my back. And I'm not quite sure what she did or how I got there. And the guys I was playing basketball with were looking at me like, oh, that really went well, didn't it? You definitely got a date with her. And so, of course, trying to collect my ego and manhood, I stood up and I said, I just let you do that. And the girls were very polite. They just kind of smiled and laughed. And we hobbled back over to play basketball. And those guys said, you didn't have a chance. You didn't know what she did. She just nailed you. So long story short was, we followed those girls to class without them knowing it. And we found out who their instructor was, Mr. Shimpano. So after they left, they never saw us. They didn't know we did this. We went in and we said, hey, we understand you teach a self-defense class. We'd like to try that. We'd like to try taking those courses. He goes, no, here at Mercyhurst, I only teach a woman's self-defense. But I'll give you the name of a person who teaches in Union City, just opened a school. And if you want, you can go there. You can tell him I sent you. His name is Steve Capella. But he goes, don't you ever call him by his first name. And he said, you go there, keep your mouth shut, ask if you can watch, sit on the floor wherever he tells you, watch the whole class. And when class is over, depending on how he perceives you guys, he will come over and ask you if you want to take lessons or just help you to the door. So when class was over, he came over and he said, are you guys interested? And we said, yeah. So that night, I think it was 8 of us decided to start taking classes. And that's how I got into martial arts.
Wow.
That was in 1973.
You remember who those other 8 people were, and are they still active in martial arts?
I remember those other 8 people. One guy lasted about 2 weeks and he was done. The rest lasted a while. A a friend of mine that just died 2 years ago actually stayed with it for me, with it for a while, and we got brown belts together. And then he faded away. So I just kept going. I did move down to Pittsburgh then. And maybe this is too long of a story. I moved down to Pittsburgh, and I was just got my first degree black belt, and Mr. Capella sent me to a Mr. John Hamilton and said, start taking lessons from him. Well, it was too late. I had too much Goshin in me. I went to Mr. Hamilton, an excellent instructor, probably the most graceful man I've ever seen. And I say that complimentary. Smooth, fluid movements, unbelievably graceful. But the style was just different enough from Goshin. I started getting in my car and driving 2 nights a week, sometimes 3 nights a week, from Pittsburgh to Erie or Pittsburgh to Union City, just to stay with Capella and keep taking lessons there.
Yeah. What was the training like back then?
Looking back now, I can see where Goshin was evolving. I wouldn't say it was tougher. It was different. And it was Capella's Goshin. Having traveled around many different schools, I've seen different versions of Goshin. They all start at the basics of what Mr. Durant showed, but you can see each one of us, even you two, do things in your own way. Your body is a different size, your movements are a little bit different, and things are not, you're not me, I'm not you. I wouldn't expect you to do each technique exactly like I do. And you don't want to be a mime, you want to be you. And if it works for you, that's what works for you. But I noticed when I first started Kumitain, we didn't really do much 7-3, and it wasn't even reinforced or told to do 7-3. We just did a guard and stood there and got hit. And not because we were dumb and didn't know what to do. That's what the technique was. You guarded, got hit, and then you exploded. You followed that strike back into that person. So if he hits you guarded, but you can get back with him before he can guard, now you've hit him. And I remember at some of the tournaments and Mr. Capella said this a number of years afterwards, Mr. Durant said, people will not know what you're doing. They will not realize that you're purposely moving 7-3, that they expect like Shotokan, straight in and straight back, straight in and straight back. Good block, hard hit, good block, hard hit. And I've noticed as I've gotten older, I don't like getting hit as much. So I like our 7-3 moves. I like the fact that I don't mind you touching me and slipping, but I don't want you to come smash me straight on. So I'm glad Goshin kind of evolved more into 7-3.
Yeah, that makes sense. Part of what we do is to not get hit, right? Like that's an important goal. I didn't know we had that route in is it kind of like sticky hands where you attach to the technique as it's retracting?
If you're quick enough and fast enough, normally what I like to do is if you're attacking, instead of connecting straight on with you, I connect to the side of you. Maybe call it 7-3 hand movement. But if you're throwing a right fist, if I can slide down the inside of your arm or the outside of your arm and duck underneath, that's what I want to do. Instead of just following your fist straight back in, I slide with you. And that's why Mr. Mullins can fight you blindfolded, unless you're an alien with 3 arms or something strange. The moment he touches you, he knows where you are, pretty much how far away you are, and how you're moving. He doesn't have to see.
I remember that was a bit of a rude awakening for me. We would like traveling to Pittsburgh to train with you guys. It was always a treat. We always looked forward to it. And I thought he did it with his eyes closed and he still beat us up. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, there's a whole lot more to learn about.
Mr. Capella told me a story once where he and Mr. Hamilton, and I've been to tournaments where I've seen Mr. Hamilton fight and I've seen him do katas, and I've seen Mr. Capella fight and do katas. They put on a demonstration once where Mr. Hamilton closed his eyes and tried to punch Mr. Capella. And I don't remember if Mr. Capella's eyes were closed or not, but it's amazing how many of their strikes they could block. And a few got in, but I'd like to have that batting average. If I'm standing with my eyes closed and you start throwing techniques and I can block and protect myself, that's pretty good. Yeah. I watched them do it, and I'm not sure how they did it.
So back, what I know from some of the stuff that I've read is back in the day, in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a pretty big tournament scene coming out of like the Erie and Cleveland area, and maybe even the Buffalo area. Did you have any crossover or any involvement with that? Some of these guys that I've read about are like Arthur Sykes or Mr. Simmons.
They were way out of my class. My class was down here. They were way up here. Yes, I've been to those tournaments. Even if I was a green belt, there was a tournament once, Mr. Capella was running it. I was a green belt at the time, and he put me in charge of not letting anyone walk on the floor with shoes on. And spectators don't always know if they want to cut across the floor and get to the stands on the other side. They just, nobody's out there fighting, and there might be 6 rings taped off. They just start walking across the floor. So Mr. Capella told me no one with shoes on the floor. Don't let anyone on the shoes with the floor, or on the floor. So I was very polite and nice until I'm standing there in a gi with a green belt on, thinking I'm tough, and I'm nicely telling people, you know, oh, please go to the side, please walk around, everything like that. This one old guy comes in with cowboy boots on. And I start walking toward him to tell him not to walk on the floor. And I remember, I don't know if it was my right arm, my left arm, somebody grabbed me, picked me up, moved me about 4 feet back, turn around and go, everybody but him. It's okay if he walks on the floor. It was Grandmaster Durant coming in. And I was about to tell him he couldn't walk on the floor. Thank goodness Mr. Capella grabbed me and stopped me from saying anything to him. That would have been a bad scene. But otherwise, I watched Mr. Sykes and the different people. Pepperman, I watched him. Billy Blanks. I watched Billy Blanks fight many times. He used to love doing this cartwheel kick. And it worked. I think people, because they were so mesmerized by all of a sudden he's starting to do a cartwheel, his foot came up and kicked him. Didn't work on Mr. Capella. I watched that fight. Did not work on him. But I saw a lot of those older people, those people back in those older days fight. And the thing that's missing now in tournaments is it's more, there was no music, there were no dance moves, there were no high flying kicks. I remember Grandmaster Durant sitting in the center and 2 judges on each side. So there were 5 of them. And there was a guy doing a kata. And one of the moves was he did a flying side kick and he jumped over top of Grandmaster Durant and landed behind them. And just watching it, I remember seeing Grandmaster Durant didn't touch the guy, but just reached up and grabbed his groin and went like this as he went by. And I don't know if Grandmaster Durant did that on purpose or if it was just a reaction. But when the guy jumped up and flew over him, he just, boom, he just grabbed him by the gonads. And it was, the guy ended up back there. I forget how he got around the other side, but I'm thinking I would never pull a stunt like that at a tournament. I don't even know how he got scored. I don't know what, I was just too much like, oh my God, did I just really see that? You see some weird things back in the old days. Nowadays, they're pretty much turn the music on. Let's go to the tempo of the music. If you watch Mr. Capella back in the old days do a kata, and his whole career. He does it to the tempo of the gray man attacking him, not to any music, not to any theme in his head. It's where that guy's coming from. That's where the music's coming from, and that's where he's fighting.
You and I have been talking a little bit about this recently, where a kata is a fight, not a show. And sometimes I get in the habit of doing it sort of as a demonstration model where I'm showing them moves to my students, but you can't lose that aspect of it being a fight. It's a training tool. You had a great quote. I told you I was going to steal it, so I'm going to use it right now. You said we do kata so that we can fight. We don't fight so that we can do kata, and I really like that.
You have to realize too that you both are senior and have been teaching long enough that you have to break it down. You have to show them. Years ago, I came up with, because I was trying to think, how can I get this into somebody's head? And for katas, I came up with form, movement, reflex, and perfection. Those are the 4 steps that I use when I teach a kata. They have to learn the form. So you can't be out there fighting your best gray man and think that some student is going to watch. They'll end up like my wife. The first tournament I ever went to, she was my girlfriend at the time. Oh, that girl that flipped me in the gym, I ended up marrying her. She's why there's Goshin in Pittsburgh. But first tournament I took her to, she thought it was just a bunch of guys out there slapping each other. She watched Mr. Capella and Billy Blank's fight, and I was all riled up. I couldn't wait to see this. And she said that was the most disappointing thing I ever saw. It looked like 2 guys just slapping each other. I didn't see anything. And I said, okay, I can believe that. You know, even when he did the cartwheel, it's like, when he tripped? What happened there? What was that? You know, she didn't even realize his feet were coming at Mr. Capella. So to sort of an untrained eye, it does just look like a bunch of slap happy guys. You might as well go get a few beers. You might even be better.
Yeah.
Okay, I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was.
There was 4. You said form, and then there was
form,
series.
movement, reflex, and perfection. Form. They have to learn the form. They have to learn the moves. So when you teach a kata, you go slow, you break it down. You might show them the first 3 or 4 moves, send them home. Let's see if they go over those. Or do they come back? And how long is it till they come back? Do they have any understanding of that, or are they ready to move on a little bit? You review that, and then maybe the next 3 or 4 moves, depending on how complicated and what they are. Once they learn the movement, once they learn the form, movement, reflex, and perfection, then you move to the next. You get to where things are starting to flow a little better, and they're getting a little better. But this is where I start stressing technique. We're not trying to do it fast. What's Mr. Capella say? Speed is for fools and rabbits. And Mr. Mullen says, you know, smooth is fast and fast is smooth. I don't want to jeopardize the technique for speed. Goshin is not a fast style. It's a very efficient style. There's almost no wasted movement at all. But once you get to that part, then you get to where it's reflex. You start getting the mind out of the way, because any street fight I've ever been in, the guy that's fighting me is not thinking. His mind is not, he's not moving at his mind speed. He's moving as fast as those muscles will snap those punches out. So you have to train yourself and do a technique so much so often that you don't think about it. It just comes out. Because if you're thinking, he's punching. Mm-hmm. And then Mr. Fife and I have had this argument for years. I wouldn't say an argument. It's a gentleman's disagreement. He says there's no perfection at all. You will never reach the point of perfection. But to me, there's my perfection, there's your perfection, there's somebody else's perfection. You get it as well or as best that you're going to get it. That doesn't mean you can't keep working on it, can't keep getting a little bit smoother. But don't let perfection get in the way of really getting it down well. You can strive for that, but be happy with just getting it really well. Anyways, so that's the 4 things.
Just a minute ago, you referenced like fighting the gray man. The Goshin katas are very different from any other style out there. They're pretty unique to what we do. do you know anything about like the development of those katas, and does there exist like a real set of bunkai or application to those katas?
From what I remember, and you have to remember, I was just a young college kid that I saw the value of learning how to do self-defense with this, but I didn't know anything about other styles. I didn't know anything about the Japanese culture. To me, it was just this little redhead just beat the snot out of me, and I'd like to learn enough to hold my own with her, and kind of get some of my manhood back in front of these other guys. To the best of my knowledge, there were 8 katas when I started, the first 8 katas. And I believe from my, and I don't have this in writing anywhere, that Mr. Durant basically made each one of them up and stole them from other styles. He can go to a tournament and sit there and watch a technique or watch a kata, go back and he can do it. He can show it. Now, would he do it exactly like that person at the tournament? Probably not. But he would clean things up, or, not to put another style down, he would make what he thought were improvements, or what he changed and made things different. I think he absolutely stole quite a bit of stuff from Mr. Readers. And not to jump ahead, but the way I come up with that is, I'm very good friends of one of Mr. Reader's direct students that took lessons up in Jamestown directly from Wilhelm Readers. And we talk, I visit him quite often. In fact, last time I was up there, we were breaking boards together, doing different techniques. And I have a video of him doing that Indonesia Kung Fu stuff. He knows all about Durant's getting his back broken. He looks at some of the katas that we do, and he definitely sees pieces and portions. That's exactly what he was taught. And so, to answer your question, I think Mr. Durant started with about nothing and started coming up with these first 8 katas, and then he and Mr. Fife and Mr. Capella would go, and Capella was pretty much the fighter, and Mr. Fife was pretty much the kata, and they would just steal different techniques and different katas and change them enough that Durant said, okay, I like it like this, let's leave it that way.
So that's pretty interesting about Mr. Readers, and I've kind of been pretty interested lately about like how that Kung Fu influence, or that Kung Tao influence, played a role in the development of Goshin Jutsu too. When you still communicate with that guy and you work out together, what are some of the big similarities that you see between the two styles? Kind of
body movement, hip control, center control is a big thing. They do more of the Kung Fu type things, where I think Durant was more, hey, this is all the wider I am. I mean, Mr. Durant only came up to about the top of bridge of my nose. That's all the taller the guy was. He didn't have a big target he had to defend, and he wasn't big on swinging arms out there. But I do remember him saying one night at Mr. Capella's school, I want you to be able to fight anybody. I don't want it just to be another karate person or some boxer. You know, if you go up against a Kung Fu or some crazy style you've never seen before, the body works only in certain ways. It's all physics. I want you to be able to fight anybody. And the guy's first name is Sam, and Sam and I will see things. And there's a kata off the top of my head, I can't even remember the name, where we do this and this and it's block. Well, for the first 30 years that I learned that, the blocking hand was on the outside, the other hand was on the inside, and rolled the forearm over. That's not Goshin. Goshin, name me one block that goes on the outside. Every block goes on the inside. So here we are learning this kata where the block is on the outside. I'd say 20 years ago, Mr. Capella all of a sudden goes, hey, I want everything on the inside now. But like like Sam said, Mr. Readers, you help roll that arm over, you help that snap. But as Mr. Capella said, in Goshin, our blocking hand is on the inside. And there's goods and bads, there are pluses and minuses for both of them. And it's all what you're used to. That's why sometimes when I do that kata, I catch myself on the outside doing it. I try not to do that in front of students. I try and do it Goshin.
Would you be comfortable telling the story about how Mr. Drant met Mr. Readers?
Yeah, this is all what I've gotten from Mr. Reader's student and from Mr. Capella and different people that I've talked to about this. That Mr. Drant used to send out notification to different schools. I don't know exactly how he worded it. I never saw the letters. But it's kind of like, hey, I hear you think you know how to fight, or I hear you think you're tough. I'm coming. I'm challenging you. So he'd go to the school. He went up to Jamestown, New York. He went to that school. And I guess he walked in and they talked to Mr. Readers, and Mr. Drant said, okay, I'm going to fight you. And Mr. Readers, there's two stories to it. Sam was not there that night. He was there the very next night with students that were there that night. Some people say Mr. Readers did a side kick to Mr. Drant's stomach so hard it broke his back and he ended on the floor. But it was such a fierce fight that he told Mr. Drant, if you get up, I'm going to kill you. So Drant didn't get up. Well, he wasn't able to get up. But Mr. Readers didn't know that. Even Sam admits Mr. Readers did not know how much he had really hurt Mr. Drant. The other story I heard was that Mr. Readers did a heel kick where he threw his foot past Mr. Drant, came around and hit him in the middle of the back with his heel and drove him to the ground. I have had more people, and people I think that would have a better knowledge, say he got kicked in the stomach, folded him forward, and he fell on the floor. Anyways, the people that went up there with Mr. Drant helped him in the car. They went back. I don't know how long it took him to recover, whatever. I don't know if he went to the hospital. I don't know if it actually broke his back or what, but it was many months before he drove back up there and said, I'd like to take lessons from you. I actually have a picture, I don't know where, of Mr. Drant, Mr. Readers fighting. And I have, while I'm talking about that, I always loved bragging about this book. I took this down when I went down in 91, just before Mr. Drant died. And I think Matty Drant really wanted the book. I had to keep it on. But it's written by R.L. Riley, and it's called The History of American Karate. And when people say, oh, Drant really didn't study, didn't take any lessons, didn't really know what he was doing, I have a picture of him. You probably can't see it there. He's in this book with many people that I'm sure you've heard of, and many people you haven't heard of, but he's right in the center, standing there in a gi. If you look at the crowd, it doesn't look like a crowd that's just going to let some Joe Schmo come walking in a karate outfit and go, hey, I know what I'm doing. These guys were tough. And there's another gentleman in here. He's passed away now. His name's Peter Masaccio. And Mr. Drant pointed him out in this book. And when I was flying for US Air, I overnighted purposely up in New York, and I would go to Mr. Masaccio's house and sit and talk to him many times for many hours. He had the best collection of martial arts written magazines, books, whatever. His house was packed with that stuff. And he's in this book many times also. And he verified that Mr. Drant was somebody to reckon with. He was little, but he was always in the fights, and he did pretty well.
Did you ever have a chance to train with Mr. Drant directly?
I wouldn't call it training. He would come on occasion to Mr. Capella's school, and I don't know if it was the first time or the second time he came. I would venture to say it was probably the first time. We all stood up against the floor, against the wall, and there was probably 16, 17 of us there. And Mr. Capella taught class, and he was very respectful. When Mr. Durant came in, we all bowed. We all stood up, just waiting for whatever Mr. Durant wanted to do, whatever he wanted to go over. He walked down the line, slapping each one of us across the face. When he was all done, I mean, none of us moved. We just stood there. When he's all done, he goes, if you guys really want to learn karate, you come to my school. You come to the Polish Falcons. I'll teach you. Well, that turned me off just a little bit. I'm right here. This guy's pretty good, I think, from what I see. I think when I'm done learning here, then maybe I'll come there. But until then, I think I'll hang here. And that's what I did. But there were times where he'd come in, and sometimes he would just talk to Mr. Capella, and sometimes he would do a technique. I got to fight him twice. I wouldn't really call it fighting. I got on the floor one time and I was so petrified. I think he did a couple techniques and then he told me to get off the floor. And the second time, I did okay. I think I lasted 20 or 30 seconds, and somehow he put one leg across the front of me and one leg across the back of me, flipped me on the ground. This is what I was told. It happened so fast. I don't know what the heck happened. It was like my wife throwing me, and his heel ended up on my Adam's apple. And that fight was over. That was done. But that's the only two times I've ever been on the floor with him. I've been at Mill Creek Mall with him, loading the refrigerator in the back of his truck. He recognized me walking through the mall. He goes, hey, come here, I need you. I was with my girlfriend, who's my wife at the time. She's like, who's that old guy? I said, I don't know, but I'm going. I knew who it was.
So you have you've trained with lots of people, and you got to spar with Master Durant. So for folks who say he doesn't know what he's doing, you have firsthand knowledge. You know that he could actually fight.
I would see him fight guys that were better than me in class. Mr. Popesky, Mr. Sandin, Mr. Struble, and it was almost like he was toying with us. I would see him take one or two fingers sometimes and just like he was swatting flies. We'd be throwing punches hard enough to break a board, and he'd be like swatting flies. And when he'd finally get bored or something, it'd be like, boom. And I forget if it was Mr. Popesky or Mr. Struble. And those guys, they were like first or second degree black belts by then. He blocked, and somehow he blocked a right punch, put his hand on the guy's shoulder, spun around, put his hand on the other guy's shoulder, and kneed him 2 knees in the back of his kidneys. Just came right up off the floor and boom, hit him in the kidney. And I know that his opponent was not letting him do that. He was that fast and that smooth. It was right around and right in.
Wow. I couldn't imagine Mr. Struble letting anybody do that to him.
No. Try it next time you see him. Let me know how that works out.
Yeah.
Mr. Struble, he's got a level of intensity that's it's very intimidating. Like he kind of like there's this shake to him that's for us when we were coming and visiting, it was super fun to work with him, but also very intimidating.
We're all getting older now, and it's like that song from Toby Keith, you know, I can't last that long. We've got to end this fight soon. So, you know, I apologize if I hurt you, but I got to do something real fast because if it goes long, you're definitely going to win.